Okay, we'll start with confidence level song, and this is referencing confidence level. It is not the statement at the end of your panic model, which says, I am 95% confident that the true, proportion of whatever, okay? This is confidence level. And so what this references is that if it's 95%, so 95, if this is a whole lot of intervals, and in fact, these would be 95% confidence intervals, 95% intervals of confidence. And so you would have tons of these. So this is one person's P hat, and so on. You'd have lots of those. So we would say that really we would expect 95%, about 95% of all of the intervals that you make that are 95% confidence interval to contain the true parameter. So the true parameter of interest is something like the true proportion of women that think they don't have enough time for themselves, or the true proportion of men that have hair growth with minoxidil, or whatever parameter is that P part of your panic model. So, for example, if this is the real answer, of course, which we don't know where it is, then you would expect about 95% of those 95% confidence intervals to catch or contain that uh, real answer. And so here comes this song. It's to Can't Buy Me Love. Confidence level, not an interval. Confidence level. Whoa, 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 whoa. Let's say 95%, 95% of all 95%, 95%. Intervals of confidence, they contain the true parameter of interest. Parameter. Oh, 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 oh. And then you can do this for another size interval. Let's see, 98% of all 98%, 98%. Intervals of confidence, they contain the true parameter of interest. Parameter. Whoa, whoa, whoa. All right, this next song is a very, very, very important one. This is the most misunderstood definition. Definition of p-value. People want to say a p-value is the probability that the null is true, and that is not correct. P-value is the probability of getting a particular sample or something more extreme if all your data is centered around the null. So it's the probability of getting your sample or something more extreme if your data is centered around the null hypothesis. So here comes that song. Do you remember when we used to sing, the p-value is the probability of getting this sample or something more extreme if the null is true? The p-value is the probability of getting this sample or something more extreme if the null is true. Okay. The next one is, what is happening all of the time whenever we have got a p-value. And so it's the things that we work on or that we can find, deciding if we can reject or fail to reject the null hypothesis. Okay, so what we have is if that p-value is low and that p-value is lower than alpha, then that's when we reject the null hypothesis. The null hypothesis has to go. So here comes that one right here. That doesn't. Oh, there we go. There we go. There we go. If the p-value is low, if the p-value is low, the null hypothesis has to go. If the p-value is low, if the p-value is low, the null hypothesis has to go. All right, let's go ahead and do the error questions. The type 1 error, you know that this is when the null is true. The null is true, but we get a sample that causes us to reject the null. Okay, so I think we all know that this one's one of your favorites, so let's go ahead and do this one. Here we go. Type 1 error. Type 1 error. If the null is really true and we get a sample that causes us to reject the null, that's a type 1 error. Type 1 error. Type 1 error. If the null is really true and we get a sample that causes us to reject the null, that's a type 1 error. Type 1. And forgot that cuts off there. All right. So let's do the type 2 errors. Not my favorite one at all, but I do this for you guys, so don't like singing it. But type 2 error is that null is false. Okay, that null is false. And so what happens is I end up not rejecting the null hypothesis, even though I should. I end up failing to reject the null hypothesis, and it is false. And the reason is because I did not get evidence. I did not get a sample far enough away. It was too close to the null. It wasn't far enough away. It wasn't past alpha. And since it wasn't past alpha in the rejection region, I did not have evidence to reject the null. All right. So here goes that one. Type 2 error, oh, type 2 error, type 2 error, caused me to fail to reject a false null hypothesis. Type 2 error, type 2 error, no evidence, I have no evidence, no evidence, caused me to fail to reject the false null hypothesis. Type 2 error, type 2 error. Okay, last one is power. This one is important. If you remember when you have the two curves, the null is not true, okay, and then we want to be able to reject that null hypothesis, and so all of the area in the alternative section that allows us to reject that null hypothesis if it is really false, that is called power. We want to be able to reject that null hypothesis if it is really false. So here goes that one. Power is the probability to reject the null if it's false indeed. Power is the probability to reject the null if it's false indeed. Okay, and then that just fades away. Okay, there are your songs to remember all of your definitions for chapters 19 to 22.